Let's roll! Yeah! 強行鬼の狂気乱舞ガン闘牛どりゃオラオラオラ It's showtime! Ha!
Itto is the new top Geo damage dealer, and he definitely packs a punch. He's cracked, jacked, and to be honest, probably needs to be smacked because he's got a massive head. He's not your usual Pyro, Cryo, or Hydro carry, and plenty of people think he's gonna be weak because he can't deal reaction damage, so to combat that, MiHoYo made him ripped. And though they didn't jack up Itto's arms, they did jack up his multipliers so that way he could still do great damage while not using any reactions. So with all that being said, here's my complete Itto guide covering his best artifacts, weapons, and teams. As usual, timestamps are in the description. Last thing, before we get started, I just wanted to give you a quick thank you for 50,000 subscribers. It's a huge milestone and honestly something I never expected this channel to get to, so thank you guys so much, and I really look forward to continuing to make awesome content for all of you. With all that being said, let's get started by talking about Itto's kit. Itto's basic attack is kind of unique. It's 4 hits, but whenever you sprint, it doesn't reset his combo. His combo also isn't interrupted by using his elemental skill if you tap it pretty quickly, so it makes it easy to integrate elemental skill into his rotation. The grace period for this is really short, and if you wait too long, the combo will reset, but if you just dash to dodge really quickly and start attacking again right away, you'll continue the combo. The next part's important, so I want to explain Itto's stack mechanic. Itto has a charged attack that's special, where he hits for high damage in quick succession. Each swing he does in his special charged attack, including his final attack, eats 1 stack of superlative super strength. He can hold up to 5 stacks at a time, and each stack is shown on Itto's back. Itto's elemental skill is Ushi, which literally translates to bull. When you press the skill button, it does a quick Ushi throw, but if you hold it, you can actually aim your throw straight ahead. Unfortunately, you cannot aim Ushi up. When Ushi takes the field, his initial placement does a small AoE of damage, so you're gonna want to use him as much as possible. Ushi is the taunt for Itto, based off of Itto's HP, and anytime Ushi takes damage or leaves the field, Itto gains a stack. Using Ushi is important to maximizing Itto's damage and also generates 3 to 4 particles per use. Itto's elemental burst is similar to Noelle's, where it infuses his attacks with GEO and gives Itto a massive attack boost based off of his defense. It also gives Itto a 10% attack speed boost, which helps his overall damage output by a bit. His burst is a bit expensive though at 70 cost. While in his burst, every first and third hit is going to generate a stack to use towards his charged attack, and the last thing to know about Itto's burst is that it snapshots stats, which means he'll keep any buffs he had before using his burst for the full 11-second duration of his burst. His first passive gives him 10% attack speed per charged attack, up to a 30% attack speed maximum. It also increases his resistance to interruption, which combined with Goro's stagger resistance can help Itto finish combos without a shield. And finally, his second passive gives his special charged attack extra damage based off of his defense, so it is worth leveling him up as much as you can. As far as talent priorities, level his normal attacks, then burst, then elemental skill. His burst is extremely valuable, and I'd honestly level his normals and burst at the same time if you can, but if you're choosing one to crown, his normals are going to be more valuable. As you can see, Itto's entire kit revolves around normal and charged attacks, and though he has a lot of combos you can use to increase his damage potential, for casual players he's pretty straightforward. So with that out of the way, I want to talk about his artifact sets so that way you guys know how to build him, but I highly recommend you guys stick around all the way to the teams section if you're looking to build him because there is so much good info. And to be honest, building Geo characters and teams is a lot different from the normal stuff we've been used to with Cryo, Pyro, and Hydro characters. The nice thing about Itto is that his artifact set is very, very straightforward. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. His best artifact set is the 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams set. The 2-piece set gives you 30% defense bonus, and the 4-piece gives you a defense and Geo damage bonus every few seconds he's off the field or whenever he does Geo damage on the field. You can max out the defense and Geo damage bonus from the 4-piece at 24% defense and 24% Geo damage, which gets added to the 30% defense from the 2-piece and just makes him a tank. Now, I know some of you guys probably have great 4-piece retracing Bullite sets and 2-piece Archaic Petra, and I get it. You'll probably be farming for 8 years before you get a crit circlet in the Husk domain, but it really is worth it. The set is just so strong on him. It's like using Crimson Witch on D-Luke. The set is basically irreplaceable. Now we're going to move on to stats though. As far as stats, you're going to want defense sands, a Geo damage goblet, and a crit rate or crit damage circlet. A Geo damage goblet makes a big difference over a defense goblet with similar substats, plus you can get defense percent on goblets that are Geo, so your more copium rolls become less copium. In terms of substats, you want to prioritize the following. To make Itto work well, you need about 130% energy recharge in an optimal team, and around 160% in a team without a dedicated battery. Since you're not going to run an energy recharge sands, you want to make energy recharge a top priority until you're able to get the right amount. But once you get to that right amount, you basically don't want any extra energy recharge over that limit because defense and crit damage and crit rate are all super valuable as well. For substats though, I highly recommend you get to that 130% energy recharge threshold and then call it good for energy. Focus on crit rate and crit damage, defense percent, followed by attack percent. Attack percent isn't actually useless with Itto, though it matters less on him than other characters. It still contributes to his overall damage output as it does with most characters, which will put it above flat defense in most scenarios. Flat defense can be better than attack percent when Itto is lower level, but since he's a carry, you're going to want to get him to level 90 eventually anyways. Artifacts for Itto are definitely the easiest part of building him. I want to move on to weapons though, because this is, well, unlike Itto's arms, this section is pretty big. Weapons for Itto are fairly straightforward, with a few exceptions. I actually got some friends to help me rank his best weapons this time, so there are numerical comparisons for you. On screen now are damage numbers for one full combo with Itto's optimal build without Goro buff. First, you can rest easy knowing that the best in slot weapon for Itto is Redhorn Stone Thresher. They didn't make a useless weapon. It's pretty cool. It's basically the Amos bow to Itto's Ganyu. It's a significant damage increase over most other options because its passive is just really broken for Itto's kit. Keep in mind though, it isn't great for any other characters outside of Itto and Noelle, including Eula, because the damage bonus you get from defense isn't huge on non-defense scaling characters. Speaking of really broken though, take a look at Skyward Pride. This actually looks pretty strange, but I promise it makes sense. Skyward Pride gives an 8% damage bonus on its passive, which doesn't match Serpent Spine, but it's still decent. It also gives a little bit of crit rate, which makes it a decent stat stick overall, but the main reason to use Skyward Pride is 1, the energy recharge main stat, and 2, the vacuum blades. At refinement level 1, it creates AoE hits that deal 80% of the wielder's attack value as damage. Now Itto's attack may be low generally, but when you activate his burst, his attack gets mega buffed, and the vacuum blades can also crit. So combining that with up to 8 of those vacuum blades in quick succession because of Itto's special charged attack, you'll see a lot of bonus damage go out. Now there are some different assumptions made for this weapon, like not having any energy recharge substat rolls, but overall it's very solid and definitely an underrated choice. My last two recommendations for weapons are Serpent Spine and White Blind. Serpent Spine is another solid option for low spenders because of its crit value and passive that gives straight up damage bonus to Itto. You don't lose stacks due to corrosion, so as long as you're running a shield with Itto or you have constant crystallized shards being generated, you should be fine to maintain all your stacks. Following Serpent Spine is going to be White Blind, the free-to-play weapon that gives attack and defense buffs over time with a defense main stat. Though getting free-to-play craftable weapons can be difficult, it definitely is worth the investment if you're not able to get something like Serpent Spine or any of the 5-star weapons on the weapon banner. It's also very good for Noelle, so if you're ever just looking for a shield character to put a defense weapon on, White Blind can double dip that way, and then Xinyan can also use it, even though it's pretty copium, but it's just very solid. Overall, you should pick the weapon that lets you crit with good defense substats, but just for reference, these are the best options. And with Goro buff, you won't see a lot of change in the order of weapon rankings, except Wolf's Gravestone getting worse by comparison. This sheet will be linked in the description for reference, so if you guys do want to take a look at it, go ahead and open that up. While you're down there in the description, if you could drop a like on the video if you've watched this far or if you're enjoying it, it lets YouTube know that this video is good, and I would appreciate it very, very much. So now that we've talked about Itto's build specifically, we can actually move on to teams. Teams for Itto are very important, since to maximize his damage, he needs a decent battery to make sure that he has his burst up, and he's not super plug and play. One downside that Itto has is his best teams are very expensive and usually require multiple 5 stars to play. That being said, the third team we're going to talk about today is fairly free to play friendly, but let's start with the first and second because that's how numbers work. The first team I want to talk about today is Itto, Albedo, Goro, and a flex character. In this team, Itto and Albedo will get buffs from Goro, with Albedo dealing bonus GEO damage over time while off the field. The flex spot can be Fischl, Raiden, or Diona, just someone to help battery Itto. By choosing Fischl or Raiden, you'll see higher damage off the field, but if you don't have Constellation 4 Goro for healing, it may be easier to actually just bring Diona so that we get shields and heals. You can also give Goro Archaic Petra in a team like this, but I'll explain that more in my Goro guide. Bringing a healer these days is pretty necessary just because Rift Wolves are trying to slowly siphon your life away like MiHoYo is your money, so make sure to bring a healer to keep these teams relevant in current content, though in the future if Rift Wolves go away, you may not need to bring one. The second team I want to talk about with you guys today is Itto, Zhongli, GeoMC, and Bennett. I mentioned earlier that attack isn't completely useless on Itto, and it's really not. By creating a team that uses attack-focused Geo characters whose constructs can resonate for extra Geo damage and tenacity uptime, you can deal decent damage over time. With Bennett in the mix, you can buff everyone on the team, including Itto, who does still benefit from Bennett's burst to deal pretty good damage, and it's a good excuse to use Lumine. Using GeoMC and Bennett, you also have a decent Itto battery as well. The one downside of this team is that tons of teams already want Bennett, so you may not want to use it if you have Bennett on something like National on the other side of Abyss, but if you're not already using Bennett in your other team, you can put him here. For free-to-play players who don't have access to a lot of 5-star characters, you can use 4-star units with Itto, like Fischl and Beto, or Bennett and Xiangling. So the first 2 slots will always be Itto and GEOMC, and if you don't have a team that's already using Bennett and Xiangling, you can put them here, with GEOMC having something like 4-piece Archaic Petra to make sure that you get an elemental damage boost whenever you pick up a Pyro Shield Shard with GEOMC. And since GEOMC does want to use her burst as often as possible, you'll have her out on the field enough for her to actually pick up the shield shards with Petra to make the set effect work. In addition to that, GEOMC is going to give you crit rate, which Xiangling can snapshot for her burst. This same concept applies to the Itto, GEOMC, Fischl, and Beto team, which is one of my personal favorites because Fischl is going to battery Itto and Beto, while also giving tenacity buff to Beto and GEOMC, and when you go ahead and use Beto, you can also snapshot GEOMC's crit rate as well. Overall, there's just a lot of buffs you can throw around this team and make it fairly strong as far as free-to-play teams go. As far as team compositions, that's basically all I have for you guys in that regard because, again, Itto teams are very, very expensive, and as of right now, there aren't enough units on the roster to make a fully synergistic team with Itto, so those teams that I listed for you are going to be the best ones so far, but we may see that change in the future with the release of new characters. For example, if there's a Geo Polearm user that comes out in the future that happens to synergize with Itto perfectly, that would be pretty neat, and I'm sure that somebody would make a YouTube video on that if it hypothetically happened. So now I want to give you guys some bonus tips about Itto that I couldn't really find a place for in the video, but they're all still very relevant and good things to think about whenever you're playing him. So the first tip that I have for you guys is that when you start Spiral Abyss, you want Itto to not be first in your party because the Husk set can gain stacks before you start the chamber. If you have him in the first slot in your party, you won't gain any Husk stacks, but if you start with him in the second slot, you can find that the damage output of Itto is increased when you switch him in. The one exception to this is going to be if you have Serpent Spine on Itto. If you do have Serpent Spine on him, you want to put him in the first slot because Serpent Spine stacks give you more damage than Husk, and the same thing applies where you'll gain stacks just before the chamber starts. The second tip that I wanted to give you guys is that because Itto snapshots, you want to make sure as many of his buffs are active as possible before you use his burst, so that way you can keep his damage bonuses for the full 11 seconds. This applies to all buffs: Noblesse, Tenacity, Crit Rate, Crit Damage buffs, Serpent Spine, White Blind, Husk of Opulent Dreams. You want to make sure that these stacks are all maxed out whenever you use his burst. The one exception to this would be in a specific rotation that you're supposed to follow to maximize your damage. In some cases, you may not actually get to have full stacks before you use his burst, but for sure in prolonged fights, you definitely want to have all of the stacks and all of the buffs on him when you use his burst, so that way you get to keep him for the full 11 seconds. The third tip that I have for you guys is actually just an interesting fact that can help you when you're making teams. Itto can hit enemies in Venti's burst due to his large attack range. This includes lifted enemies. I tested this out. Ushi can hit as well. It's awesome. So Venti could be a really good flex in an Itto team for clearing trash enemies, and as we see the return of Leyline Monoliths in Spiral Abyss, this becomes even more relevant. The fourth and final tip I have for you with Itto is that similarly to most of the DPS in the game, Itto has specific combos that you can learn to maximize his damage output that vary by weapon. The video would be way too long if I included all these combos, but in the description are sheets that show optimal Itto combos for maximizing his damage, and in some cases, the right combo can increase Itto's damage over time by 20%. That's a pretty significant margin, and it's definitely worth learning if you're an Itto main. Before we wrap up the video with overall conclusions, I want to let you know what Itto's best constellations are and whether or not they're worth pulling for, as well as if you should pull for Redhorn or C1 Itto. Itto's Constellation 1 is his best low spender value, since it gives you 2 bonus stacks for your special charged attack when you activate your burst, and gives you 3 bonus stacks to use throughout your burst after 1 second. It's a comfy constellation that'll give you more overall damage in that 11-second window. Definitely great for low spenders. Constellation 2 isn't focused on Itto's burst damage, but can massively help increase his burst uptime by lowering his cooldown by 1.5 seconds and giving 6 energy for every Geo character in the party. It's mostly quality of life, but it makes playing Itto much more comfy. Constellation 3 increases Ushi's level by 3. Constellation 4 buffs your party with 20% defense and 20% attack for 10 seconds after Itto's burst ends. It's actually really solid when you're rotating through the rest of your party, and it's pretty helpful in longer content like Abyss where Itto can't speedrun. Constellation 5 is a big overall damage increase by leveling his burst up by 3, and Constellation 6 gives Itto buff arms. Is what I'd like to say. It makes his damage significantly better though by increasing crit damage of his special charged attack and giving Itto a 50% chance not to use a stack. Overall, for low spenders, Constellation 1 is actually really good value, and for whales, C6 is actually very strong as well. If you're trying to choose between Redhorn and Constellation 1, it really depends on the other weapons you have and what your philosophy for the game is. Constellation 1 and Redhorn provide similar value damage-wise, but Redhorn doesn't require you to change your attack combo, and can also be used on Noelle and any future defense scaling Claymore users. use. C1 Itto is easier to guarantee than a weapon from Zero Pity though, and ultimately I would say C1 Itto is safer unless you want Skyward Harp or any of the 4-star weapons on the banner, but if you do want Skyward Harp as well, pulling for Redhorn will be more valuable for you than C1, because in a worst case scenario, you could still find yourself with a weapon you were looking for. That being said, everyone's situation is different and these are just my opinions. Do what you want with your account, don't let me stop you. We covered a lot of information, but there are tons of things to think about when you're building Itto, so I hope that this guide helped. In my time spent with Itto across the early access server, I found it to be pretty fun and definitely very strong. The main downside to Itto is that his best teams are often expensive to build, and for newer players, you may have trouble clearing Spiral Abyss 12 with him. With that being said though, he's better than some of the other characters we've seen from Inazuma and can use a free-to-play weapon very, very well. All in all, if you're saving for Ganyu or Xiao, keep saving because they're right around the corner, but if you're looking for a new and fun unit to play, Itto is great for that. Anyways guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video and I hope that it helped you guys out a lot. If you could do me a huge favor and like the video if you've enjoyed or made it this far, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Genshin content and some future Pokemon content as well. Leave a comment down below if you're getting Itto or what you're most excited for with him, and I will catch you guys next time.